Luke had worked on the joint human-alien research station for almost 8 months. Orbiting the cold silver moon of Pelra 5, the station was a quiet place most days, filled with the sound of machinery, distant footsteps, and the low hum of the life support systems. Humans and aliens moved through the corridors together, working on science projects, supply runs, and maintenance. Luke's job was to manage supply deliveries. Crates came in from transport ships, medical equipment, tools, food, and rare minerals, and he made sure they reached the right departments. It wasn't the most exciting job, but Luke liked meeting people along the way. He talked with scientists, engineers, even alien diplomats. Most of them were polite, some were friendly. But now and then, he noticed tension in the air, especially between certain alien groups. One evening, Luke was wheeling a cart full of medical crates down the main corridor toward the infirmary. The lights above flickered softly, casting a warm glow across the metal walls. When he entered the infirmary, he saw a few nurses moving quickly between beds. In the far corner, sitting alone on one of the benches, was someone he hadn't seen before. She was an alien, Vera, if he guessed right. The Vera were tall and slim, with skin in soft shades that sometimes shimmered under light. Hers was pale silver, almost white, but her posture was closed off. She sat with her head slightly bowed, her long dark hair falling like a curtain over one side of her face. Her arms were crossed tightly, her sleeves pulled far down, even though the room was warm. Luke set the crates down and signed the delivery tablet for the nurse. Before leaving, his eyes went back to the corner. Something about the way she was sitting told him she didn't want to be noticed, but was afraid someone might notice anyway. When he walked past her bench, he slowed his steps. "Hi," he said gently. Her head turned just enough for one bright, cautious eye to meet his. Then she looked away quickly. "Don't look at me," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Luke stopped. Most people would have taken the hint and kept walking, but instead he sat down at the far end of the bench. She stiffened. "I heard," Luke said calmly. "But you're sitting alone, and I just finished my shift. Thought I'd keep you company." Her gaze flicked toward him, puzzled. "You shouldn't," she murmured. "Why not?" he asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she adjusted her sleeves, pulling them down even more. The silence stretched. Luke didn't push her. He simply leaned back and looked toward the large infirmary window that showed the endless black of space dotted with distant stars. After a while, he said, "You're Vera, right?" She hesitated. "Yes. I've met a few Vera before," Luke said. "Most of them like to talk about their homeworld. It's supposed to have forests so big you can't see the sky from the ground." Her voice was faint, almost defensive. "You've never been there." "True," Luke admitted. "But maybe one day." Her lips pressed together, as if she wanted to end the conversation, but his tone wasn't mocking or nosy. Slowly, she asked, "Why are you still here?" Luke smiled faintly. "I told you. Just keeping you company." She looked away again. "Humans are strange," he chuckled. "We hear that a lot." Before either of them could say more, a nurse walked by, carrying a tray of medical tools. She gave a quick, polite nod to Luke, but didn't look at the Vera girl at all. Luke noticed the way the girl's shoulders dropped slightly, like she was used to being invisible. He wanted to ask her name, but something told him not to rush. Instead, he stayed until the infirmary lights dimmed slightly, signaling the evening cycle. Then he stood. "Guess I'll see you around." She didn't reply, but he thought he caught a flicker of curiosity in her eyes as he left. The next day, Luke found himself walking past the infirmary again, this time with a small delivery of nutrient packs. The girl was there again, sitting in the same corner. She glanced up when he entered, then looked away as if she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't. "Still here?" Luke asked as he set the delivery box on the counter. I work here, she replied quietly. Well, I'm supposed to. He tilted his head. Supposed to? She didn't answer, so he just nodded and took a seat on the same bench as before. You're persistent, she said, almost accusingly. So I've been told, Luke said with a grin. This time, the silence didn't feel as heavy. She didn't. Tell him to leave. And he didn't push her to talk. They just sat, listening to the faint hum of the machines. After a few minutes, she spoke. My name is Solara, Luke smiled. Nice to meet you, Solara. I'm Luke. Her eyes studied him for a moment, as if trying to figure out why he wasn't laughing at her, mocking her, or avoiding her. You're different, she finally said. Maybe, Luke replied, but so are you, and that's not a bad thing. She didn't know how to respond to that, so she just turned her gaze toward the stars outside. Later that night, Luke lay in his small quarters thinking about her words and the way she avoided being looked at. He wondered what could make someone hide so much of themselves. He decided he would find out, not by asking blunt questions, but by being there, every day, until she understood he wasn't going to vanish like everyone else seemed to. And deep inside, he hoped she would start to believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't need to hide from him at all. Over the next few days, Luke found more reasons to stop by the infirmary. Sometimes he had real work there, dropping off supplies or checking on shipments, but other times he simply walked in with a casual greeting and a smile. Solara never told him to leave again, though she still seemed unsure about his presence. She was careful with her words. Most days she spoke only when he asked something directly, but each answer was just a little longer than the day before. He noticed small changes, how her shoulders didn't stay as tense when he sat near her, how her eyes lingered a moment longer when he spoke, how the corner of her mouth sometimes tilted, like she wanted to smile but wasn't sure if it was allowed. Luke didn't push. He didn't ask about the long sleeves she always wore, even when the air on the station was warm. He didn't question why some of the other staff barely looked at her or spoke to her. Instead, he talked about small things: the weather simulation in the human quarters, the strange way alien food dispensers worked, and the view from the observation deck when the moon's shadow passed over the nearby gas giant. One afternoon, as he sat beside her in their usual corner, he pulled something from his pocket. It was a small, flat device no bigger than his palm. What's that? She asked, curiosity slipping into her voice. A holoframe, Luke said, tapping it. A faint blue shimmer appeared above it, forming an image of a wide green field under a bright blue sky. That's home, or part of it. Solara tilted her head, studying the image. It's open. Yeah, Luke said. On Earth we have places like this that go on for miles. No walls, no ceilings, just sky. Her eyes softened, almost wistful. Vera cities have sky gardens, but they're high up. The ground is for other things. She trailed off, her tone unreadable. Luke smiled gently. You'd like Earth. I think the wind there would surprise you. For the first time, he caught her looking directly at him without flinching. But then her gaze shifted down to her arms, and she pulled her sleeves tighter. Later that week, Luke arrived at the infirmary to find Solara standing near the storage cabinets, talking to one of the alien nurses. He didn't catch all the words, but he heard enough to notice the nurse's tone, cold, dismissive. The nurse walked away without even glancing at Luke. Solara's posture was rigid, her eyes fixed on the floor. What was that about? Luke asked gently. Nothing, she said quickly. Didn't sound like nothing. She shook her head. You wouldn't understand. Maybe not, Luke admitted. But you could explain. Solara hesitated, then shook her head again. Not yet. Luke didn't press. Instead, he stepped closer and handed her a wrapped packet. Here, it's called chocolate. Thought you might like it. She looked at the packet suspiciously, then unwrapped it slowly. The moment she took a small bite, her eyes widened. "Sweet," she murmured. "Too sweet?" Luke asked. She shook her head quickly. "No, it's good." A tiny, genuine smile formed on her lips. Luke stored that image in his mind, knowing how rare it was. One evening, as the station lights dimmed for night cycle, Luke was making his way back from the engineering deck when he spotted Solara in one of the quiet corridors. She was alone, standing near the viewport, her back to him. He was about to greet her when he noticed something. Her sleeves were rolled up slightly, just enough for a faint line to be visible on her forearm. It wasn't a normal marking. It looked like an old wound, pale against her silver skin. Before he could say anything, she tugged her sleeves down again, as if realizing too late that someone might see. She turned and froze when she saw him. "You didn't see anything," she said quickly. Luke raised his hand slightly. "I wasn't looking for anything. Just came by to say hi." Her eyes searched his face for a trace of judgment, but found none. After a pause, she said quietly, "You ask me questions, but you don't ask the one everyone else does." "What's that?" "What happened to me?" Luke nodded slowly. "Because it's your choice to tell me, not mine to take." Solara's expression softened, though she still looked conflicted. "You're strange, human," he smiled. "So I've heard." A few days later, a small incident broke the quiet rhythm of the station. During a cargo unloading, one of the crates slipped from its harness and crashed to the floor. The sound was loud, sharp, echoing down the corridors. Luke rushed over to help secure the area. When he looked up, he saw Solara standing nearby, frozen in place, her hands gripping her sleeves tightly. He approached slowly. "Hey, you okay?" She blinked rapidly, as if snapping out of a memory. "Yes, it sounded like—" She stopped herself. "Like what?" Luke asked. She shook her head. "Doesn't matter." But it did matter. Luke could see it in her eyes. The sound had brought her back to something she didn't want to remember. "You don't have to tell me," he said softly. "But if you ever do, I'll listen." Solara looked at him for a long moment, before nodding once. Their conversations grew slightly longer after that. Sometimes they talked about harmless things, food, music, strange customs from their worlds. Other times, silence spoke for them. Still, Luke could feel it. Something was locked away behind those sleeves and behind the way she told him not to look at her. He didn't know when, but he believed the day would come when she would tell him. And when that day came, he would be ready to sit even closer. The station was quiet when the alarms began. At first, it was a low pulse, almost like the hum of the life support system, but then the sound rose sharply, echoing through every corridor. Red lights flashed along the walls, and the intercom announced, "Warning, power fluctuation detected in Section 4. All personnel avoid the area until secured." Luke was in the storage bay, halfway through inventory. His head snapped toward the sound. Section 4 was close to the infirmary. Without thinking, he grabbed his comm and started moving, weaving through the corridors as crew members hurried in the opposite direction. When he reached the infirmary, the lights were already flickering. The steady white glow broke into uneven flashes, throwing moving shadows across the room. Solara was near the far wall, helping a nurse secure medical trays. "Solara," he called. She looked up, her expression tight but controlled. "What are you doing here? You should be in the safe zone." "So should you," he replied, stepping toward her. "Let's get out of here." A sudden jolt shook the floor, sending one of the tall supply shelves crashing sideways. Metal clanged against the ground, and a few smaller items rolled across the floor. Solara stumbled, and Luke caught her arm before she could fall. "Come on," he urged. They moved toward the side exit, but another tremor shuddered through the station. The door mechanism flickered and went dead, sealing them inside. The main lights failed completely, leaving only the dim red emergency glow. Backup power must be unstable, Luke muttered. We'll have to wait until it resets. Solara sat down slowly against the wall, her breathing slightly uneven. Luke took a seat beside her, close enough that the warmth of their shoulders almost touched. For a long moment, they sat in silence. Then, without looking at him, Solara said, "You saw, didn't you?" "Saw what?" Luke asked. "Before. In the corridor the other day. You saw part of my arm." Luke paused. "I noticed, but I didn't stare." Her voice was low, almost shaking. "Most people stare, or they look away too quickly, like they're afraid of what they saw." "I'm not afraid," Luke said gently. Her hands tightened on her sleeves. "These scars, they're from the last days on my homeworld. There was a battle. The enemy destroyed our defense grid. My unit stayed behind to protect the civilians, trying to escape. We held for as long as we could, but—" She stopped, her throat tightening. Luke waited, letting her decide if she wanted to go on. "An explosion hit the building we were in. I was thrown into the blast. The others, most didn't survive. When they pulled me out, I was burned, cut, broken. The healers saved me, but the marks stayed." She exhaled slowly, her gaze fixed on the floor. "When I returned home, people avoided me. They said I reminded them of the war, of what we lost. I became something to hide away, not a hero, just a shadow." Luke's jaw tightened. "That's wrong. You fought for your people. You lived through something no one else could. That's strength." She shook her head. "To my people, beauty is tied to worth. Scars mean imperfection. Imperfection means less." "Then your people are missing the truth," Luke said firmly. "Because where I come from, scars tell stories. They show what you've survived. They mean you've lived through something that could have ended you, but didn't." Solara looked at him finally, her eyes reflecting the dim red light. "And what story do you think mine tell? That you're still here," Luke replied. "And that matters more than anything." The emergency lights flickered, casting shadows that seemed to move across the walls. Solara didn't speak, but she didn't look away either. Her posture relaxed, just slightly, as if a weight she'd been carrying for years had shifted 15. Minutes later, the backup systems hummed to life and the door mechanism hissed open. Luke stood and offered his hand to help her up. She hesitated, then took it. They walked out into the corridor, where the station crew was already moving to check the damaged sections. As they passed the engineering deck, Luke glanced at her. "You okay to finish your shift?" he asked. She gave a faint nod. "Yes, and thank you." "For what?" "For listening. For not looking at me like they do." Luke smiled slightly. "I told you before, I'm not going anywhere." Over the next few days, things between them changed in small ways. Solara still wore her long sleeves, but now she sometimes pushed them up when she worked, not caring if Luke was nearby. Their conversations grew more personal. She told him about the quiet rivers of her homeworld, about the way the sun set in silver light over the forests. Luke told her about his first trip into space, about how his mother used to take him to the coast just to watch the waves. Once, when he brought her a small data pad filled with images of Earth's oceans, she lingered over them for a long time. "You'd like the water," Luke said. "It's alive in a way that's hard to explain. You can hear it, feel it, smell it. It makes you feel small, but in a good way." Solara's lips curved in a faint smile. "You talk like someone who wants to show me." "Maybe one day," he said, only half joking. One evening, as they sat together in the infirmary's quiet corner, Solara asked, "Why do you keep sitting with me?" Luke tilted his head. "Because I like talking to you, and because you seem like someone worth knowing." Even with the scars? She asked softly. Especially with the scars, Luke said. They're part of your story, and I want to know all of it. Solara looked at him for a long time, her gaze steady. Maybe. Someday. I'll let you. No rush, Luke replied, with a smile. I'll be here. And for the first time since he'd met her, she didn't look away. The station was busier than usual. A small delegation from the Vera homeworld had arrived for talks with the Human Council representatives. Luke had heard about the visit for weeks. These were high-ranking Vera diplomats, important figures, with strict traditions and expectations. Solara seemed tense the moment the news broke. She moved through the infirmary faster than usual, speaking less, avoiding the corridors near the main docking bay. Luke noticed the way she avoided looking out at the arriving ships. That morning, he found her standing by the supply shelves, quietly organizing medical kits. You're hiding, Luke said, leaning against the doorway. She didn't look up. I'm working. Solara, he said softly. Is this about the diplomats? Her hand stilled on the shelf. They will know me. They will remember, and they will say the same things they said before. What things? That I am a reminder of failure. That I am unfit to represent Vera beauty. That I should be hidden so others are not uncomfortable seeing me. Her voice was quiet but steady, the words heavy from being carried too long. Luke stepped closer. You don't have to believe them. But everyone else will, she replied. Their words will follow me here, and you will hear them too. He shook his head. Let them talk. I know who you are, and they're wrong. She gave him a faint, almost sad smile, as if she wanted to believe him but couldn't. The diplomats arrived in the afternoon. The docking bay was filled with movement, crew members, guards, and translators moving around in careful formation. The Vera delegation walked with slow, deliberate steps, their robes flowing, their expressions calm and distant. Luke had no reason to be in the docking area, but he ended up there anyway, helping move a supply crate out of the way. As he worked, he spotted Solara on the far side of the bay. She had been sent to deliver a medical scanner for inspection. He saw the exact moment one of the diplomats noticed her. The man's eyes narrowed, and his lips curved in a cold smile. He whispered something to the Vera woman beside him, who gave a soft, dismissive laugh. Solara's shoulders stiffened, but she kept walking. Luke didn't hear the first remark, but the second one carried just enough for him to catch. I see the war's ghosts still wander your halls. The words were not meant for him, but they hit hard. He could see Solara pause just slightly as if the air had grown heavier. Before he could think, Luke stepped forward. She's not a ghost, he said clearly, his voice cutting through, the low hum of the bay. She's one of the bravest people on this station. She stayed behind to protect civilians while others ran. I'd trust her with my life before I'd trust anyone who hides behind cruel words. The bay went still. A few heads turned. The diplomat's expression tightened, but he didn't respond. Solara's eyes widened slightly. Her breath caught in her chest. Luke didn't break eye contact with the diplomat until the man looked away. Then he turned to Solara. Let's go, he said softly. They walked in silence until they reached the quieter corridor leading to the infirmary. Solara finally stopped, turning toward him. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yes, I did, Luke replied. Because you shouldn't have to stand there and hear things like that without someone speaking the truth. Her gaze dropped to the floor. You don't understand what this means. Vera culture. Words like that are not just insults. They are judgments that shape how others see you. When someone of their rank speaks, the rest listen. Then let them listen. Luke said, let them hear that there's another side to the story. She met his eyes then, something fierce and uncertain mixed together. You will make enemies. Maybe, he said with a shrug. But you're worth it. Her breath caught, and for a moment she couldn't speak. Later that evening, the station felt calmer. The diplomats had retreated to the council chambers, and the docking bay was quiet again. Luke found himself back in the infirmary, leaning against the same bench where he'd first met Solara. She walked in, holding a data pad. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just stood there looking at him. Then she sat down beside him. "When you spoke for me today," she said slowly, "it felt like something broke. Not in a bad way, like a wall that had been there for a long time." Luke smiled. "Good. Walls are overrated. You don't know how long it has been since someone stood beside me like that," she continued. "My own people. They looked away." "Then maybe they're not your people anymore," Luke said gently. "Family is the ones who stay, not the ones who turn their backs." She was quiet for a while, staring at her hands. Then she said, "I used to think no human could understand what it meant to be seen as less. But maybe you understand more than I thought. I think everyone knows what it's like to be judged for something that isn't fair," Luke replied. "But I also know we can choose not to accept it." Solara turned to look at him fully. "You didn't look away when I told you not to. And today, you didn't look away again." "Never will," Luke said. For the first time since they'd met, her smile reached her eyes. From that day, things shifted again. Solara didn't walk with her head down in the corridors anymore. She still wore her sleeves most of the time, but she no longer tugged at them nervously. And whenever someone looked at her too long or too strangely, Luke was never far away, just close enough to remind her she wasn't standing alone anymore. The Vera diplomats remained on the station for several more days. Most of their time was spent in private meetings, but they occasionally walked the main corridors with their aides. Whenever Solara spotted them in the distance, she would quietly, "Take another path." Luke didn't push her, but he knew that avoiding them forever wasn't possible. One afternoon, Luke was restocking emergency kits near the station's central plaza when he saw Solara standing by one of the glass railings. She was alone, looking down at the slow rotation of the planet far below. Her posture was different from when they first met. Less closed, more steady, but her eyes were still thoughtful. "You're in the open," Luke said as he approached. She glanced at him. "I'm not hiding." "Good," he said with a small smile. "You look like you belong here." "Do I?" she asked quietly. "More than most," he replied. Before Solara could answer, voices carried from the far side of the plaza. The Vera delegation had entered, their robes flowing as they walked in a neat formation. Among them was the same diplomat who had insulted her in the docking bay. His eyes swept the plaza, pausing briefly when he saw her. Luke felt her tense, beside him. He leaned closer and said softly, "You don't have to move if you don't want to." Solara didn't step away this time. Instead, she straightened her back and faced the approaching group. The diplomat slowed as he neared her. "I see you still remain here," he said in their native language, his tone smooth but laced with judgment. "I do," Solara replied in the same tongue, her voice calm. Luke didn't understand the words, but he could read the tone, neither hostile nor submissive. The diplomat's gaze flicked to her covered arms. "Do you still hide the reminders of our greatest shame?" This time, Solara didn't lower her eyes. "These are not shame," she said firmly. "These are proof that I stood when others fell. They are proof that I bled so others could live." The diplomat's expression tightened. "You speak as if that makes you a hero." "It makes me someone who did not run," she said, her voice steady enough to draw glances from other crew members nearby. "And if you cannot see that, then the shame is yours, not mine." A quiet murmur passed through the plaza. Luke didn't know the exact words, but he could tell she had just said something that hit hard. The diplomat gave a short, sharp exhale, then turned without another word, leading the delegation away. When they were gone, Solara stood still for a moment. her breathing controlled. Luke stepped up beside her. "I don't know what you said," he admitted, "but it looked like you just won a battle." She let out a soft breath. "Maybe I did, or maybe I just stopped losing one." Luke smiled. Either way, that was impressive. She glanced at him, and there was something new in her expression, something lighter. "You gave me the push. Before, I would have stayed quiet, but today, I didn't want to be silent anymore." "Good," Luke said. "You shouldn't be." Later that day, in the infirmary, a younger Vera medic approached Solara while Luke was nearby. The medic hesitated, then said quietly, "I heard what you said in the plaza. I thought maybe I was wrong about you." Solara's brow furrowed. "Wrong," the medic nodded. "I believed the stories, that you were only alive because you were lucky, not strong. But I think I understand better now." Solara didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Strength isn't always about winning. Sometimes it's about surviving when it's easier to give up." The medic gave a small nod and walked away. Luke, who had been pretending to sort through supplies, looked at her. "Sounds like someone's listening to you now." "Maybe," she said softly, "and maybe that matters more than I thought." That evening, they sat together on the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly across the black, and the curve of the nearby planet glowed faintly in the distance. Solara leaned back slightly in her seat. "When I first came here, I thought it would just be another place to hide. Another set of walls to keep people away. But somehow, I ended up meeting you." "Sorry if I ruined your hiding place," Luke said with a grin. "You didn't ruin it," she replied, her tone almost amused. "You opened it." They sat in comfortable silence for a while before Solara spoke again. "I think I'm ready for people to see me. Not just you, all of them." Luke nodded. "Then when they look, they'll see someone worth knowing." She looked at him, her silver eyes steady. "You've said that before." "I'll keep saying it until you believe it," he said, and this time she didn't look away. From that day forward, Solara didn't take the long way around the station anymore. She walked through the main corridors, greeted people openly, and even began helping in areas where she would be noticed. Some still stared, but she no longer shrank under their gaze. And whenever Luke was near, he saw something in her posture, a quiet, unshakable strength that had been there all along, just waiting for the moment to step into the light. A week after the Vera delegation left the station, the air felt lighter. No more tense whispers in the corridors, no more deliberate glances from high-ranking visitors. Life on the station returned to its usual rhythm, quiet hums of machinery, soft chatter from crew members, and the constant view of the planet turning below. Solara was different now. She still wore her long sleeves, but not every day. Sometimes she rolled them up when working, and if someone's eyes lingered too long, she didn't pull them back down. Instead, she met their gaze until they looked away. Luke noticed the change and couldn't help feeling proud. That morning, he was helping move a shipment of medical supplies when Solara walked into the storage bay. She carried a list in her hand and looked more confident than he had ever seen her. "Morning," Luke greeted. "Morning," she replied with a small smile. "I'm here to collect the equipment for the training room. The medics want to start cross-species first aid lessons next week." "Sounds useful," Luke said, handing her a small scanner. "You leading the training?" "Part of it," she admitted. "They asked me after hearing about the plaza." "Guess your voice carries further than you thought," Luke said, with a grin. Solara tilted her head, amused. "Or maybe you're just louder than you realize, human." Later that day, the station held a community gathering in the central plaza. It wasn't formal, just a way for crew from different sectors to share food and stories. Music from 3 different worlds blended together, and the smell of dishes from dozens of cultures filled the air. Solara and Luke stood near the railing, plates in hand. She watched as humans and aliens alike mingled, laughing and trading tales. When I first came here, Solara said quietly, I thought I would spend my time avoiding places like this. And now? Luke asked. Now, I want to be part of it. She didn't move to the edge of the crowd right away. Instead, she glanced at Luke, as if asking silently if he would go with her. He nodded, and together they stepped into the flow of people. They spoke with a pair of human engineers, then with a group of alien scientists who asked Solara about her medical expertise. To Luke's quiet satisfaction, she didn't hide her arms when one of them noticed the faint lines of her scars. Instead, she explained a technique she had learned during the war to treat burns, speaking with calm authority. After a while, they found themselves near the music area, where a few brave souls were trying to teach each other dances from their homeworlds. A Vera tune began to play, a slow, graceful rhythm. Solara froze for a moment, then gave a small, almost shy smile. It's been a long time since I've heard this, she murmured. Then maybe it's time you heard it again, Luke said. Before she could argue, he stepped closer and held out his hand. Come on. She hesitated, glancing around, but then placed her hand in his. They moved into the open space, and Solara began to guide him through the steps, soft, sweeping motions, with turns that mirrored the sway of trees in the wind. Luke's movements were far from perfect, but she laughed quietly when he stumbled, and the sound was light, unguarded. After the dance ended, they stepped outside to the quieter walkway that circled the station's outer ring. Here, the stars were sharp and endless, and the curve of the planet glowed faintly in the dark. I never thanked you, Solara said after a moment. For what? Luke asked. For sitting beside me that first day when I told you not to look at me. For not leaving when I expected you to. For all of it. All of. You don't have to thank me, Luke said gently. I didn't do anything special. I just stayed. You stayed when no one else did, she replied. That is special. They walked slowly along the rail, the silence between them warm, instead of heavy. When I covered my scars, Solara said quietly, it wasn't just to keep others from seeing them. It was to keep myself from seeing them. Because I thought they only told one story, a story of loss. But you made me see another one. The story of survival, Luke said. She nodded. And of being worth more than what others say. They stopped near the widest section of the walkway, where the stars seemed close enough to touch. Solara turned toward him, her silver eyes steady. When you first sat closer to me, she said, I thought you were just stubborn. Now, I think you saw something in me I had forgotten was there. Maybe I did, Luke said with a faint smile. Or maybe you just needed someone to remind you. Either way, she said softly, I'm glad you didn't look away. Never will, Luke promised. They stood there for a while, watching the stars in silence. The hum of the station wrapped around them, and somewhere in the distance, faint music from the gathering still played. For the first time in years, Solara didn't feel the need to hide. Not from the crew, not from the diplomats who might return, someday, and not from herself. She was still scarred. She was still different. But now, she was also unafraid. And Luke, standing beside her under the endless sky, knew he would sit closer to her every single time, no matter what came next.